Yeah, we're going to talk about go-to-market, and the way I've designed this workshop, I never know what is really germane to my audience when we're talking about something as broad as go-to-market planning, and so we're actually it'll be a little bit interactive, as you'll see. But let's just start with some basic objectives. So I'm hoping we achieve three things. Number one, identifying go-to-market challenges across the whole landscape of everything that it is comprised of, right? Reviewing various tactical approaches to resolving them, right? I mean, inevitably, at some point, you're going to say, hey, let's bring this down to the ground and talk about what we can actually do here. So I want to make sure that we can get into that. And then finally, answering the what next question, right? Figuring out how to take what we were learning about go-to-market planning, but also layer on data and intelligence, anything that can, sort of de-risk these strategies and give us a little bit more confidence as we step out into the abyss. So, with that in mind, I will just briefly, thank you, Eugene, for the rousing intro. I'll just put a little bit of context around my journey as a professional, because I think probably we have some things in common, but I'll kind of go through it quickly. So, I actually broke into this world as in the media and advertising space. So I founded a digital marketing agency. I did that before I had any experience, which, by the way, I don't recommend. Being a founder without experience, not easy. But as you can see, I managed to score some work with some pretty reputable brands. And in the advertising world, your brand, the company you keep, is everything, right? That business, which started as a search engine marketing consultancy, was acquired by a bigger agency. I had the experience of running a global department, which was awesome. Eventually, that turned into a job at Google, and I had a kid on the way. I wanted some stability. I was getting burned out by the agency business, so all signs pointed to ending my ride as a business owner, at least temporarily. And at Google, I worked entirely on automotive business. In the large ad sales organization, which still is, $9 out of $10 earned by the company. And so, I had the benefit of working with huge, 9-figure accounts, running all over the world, trying to get them to, activate in emerging markets. At one point, I even ran strategy for the vertical, which was at the time about $1 billion. And so I also made some other stops in the ad tech industry and managed to work on some non-auto brands. But everything about this, it gives you a lot of experience and exposure to how people basically are using data to measure behavior and make big investment decisions. That's really what it comes down to. And you can apply that from the advertising world to so many other walks of life. At some point, though, I got tired of slinging ads. And I fell out of love with my product. I said I need something new. And so I got into what I saw as innately more mission-driven work in the workforce and education space. So alternative education, this was 2020, right? It was having its moment because all of a sudden people realized, hey, we actually have these technologies that allow us to go into an environment that's purely digital and learn and work and operate and have relationships as well as before. And so I was working not so much on the academic side, but actually out in the field on program development and on business development. So going and finding communities through their workforce board, economic development, any philanthropic partners. We sometimes would work through governor's offices, wherever we could get an audience to try to get funding for large-scale upskilling and reskilling initiatives. So all of these people in America that are cut out of the traditional 4-year university path, right, which is an increasing share of Americans that don't get that benefit, but have so much to offer and have and just need a chance. They have the grit, they have the smarts, they just need someone to give them an opportunity. And so, as you can see, working both with these public and private partnerships as well as directly with enterprises, we really got our mission out there in front of people and said, hey, there are other ways to do this. There are other ways to groom talent for these technology jobs, which 5 years ago is actually a very different hiring atmosphere than today, but very important to keep those jobs, staffed because yeah, as some of you know, I know some of you are working on workforce development challenges of your own. The lack of skilled hands on the job is a big concern for our progress going forward. And then at some point I said, actually, I never really kind of lost my entrepreneurial drive, and I brought it full circle and founded Mission Flywheel. This is about 18 months ago, and my business exists to basically be a revenue strategy partner to mission-driven organizations. I do work with education and workforce, but I work with climate, healthcare, other nonprofits. You can find real kind of true social entrepreneurs in almost any industry, as you all know. So anyway, that's a little bit about me, but we're really here to talk about you. So we're approaching the interactive portion. So hopefully you have your cell phones on you, because I wanted to do a live poll here. What I've listed here are 8 go-to-market challenges. And I'm going to ask you to vote for 3 that are top of mind for you. And it's cool, we're going to start to see the results populate in real time. We'll limit it to your top 3, that way we can start to see which ones rise to the top. And that way, I've got more slides in here than I plan to cover, but we'll just sort of go on the fly and let's see what shows up in the data. And if it's not working right, somebody just put me out of my misery, please. For those who just joined, if you want to zap that QR code and answer the question, the prompt. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, please.
How did you work with, how did you get through the workforce? I saw that you had a Ohio-based workforce organization.
That was, you're probably talking about Tech Elevator, or at least Tech Elevator is still a technology boot camp for, they basically reskill and upskill people from non-technical backgrounds into full stack developers. So they have tracks for Java and .NET, and it's like a 14-week program. I was running the enterprise department, which was basically working directly with the corporations to reskill their people. So they would come to us, and like JP Morgan Chase would say, hey, we've got 40 technical support reps, and we want to groom these people who have some of the hard skills and can acquire some of these coding principles to actually prepare them for jobs in the software development organization.
So was it difficult to make a partnership with workforce development?
It was very difficult.
That's kind of challenge that I have. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be happy to talk more offline about it. Some of my experience at Udacity, actually, the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio, which is home in Columbus, was one of the innovators that really kind of got our program off the ground. There's no substitute for just the hard work and the elbow grease, but there are a couple tricks picked up along the way. Awesome. Is anyone still waiting to vote? We have 3 front runners, which is very convenient. So I'll give you one more second while I make a note of these. Okay, I'm going to go with these 3, and it looks like roughly at least 5 votes for each of these top 3. And so, if we have time, we can cover the others. And I assume afterwards, also you'll get a copy of the slides, so you can always see what I intended to cover. But anyway, we're going to talk about articulating our value proposition, generating awareness and demand, and converting leads into paying customers. These I think of as higher up, earlier in the go-to-market planning stage, and so these are good fundamentals to get nailed, before you get too much further. So, articulating your value proposition. So all of these are going to follow a sort of a basic format. I'll start with a couple of talking points about each stage. We'll look at a case study, and I use that term loosely, a case study of a brand that I think is a good model for it. And then we'll also make it interactive. So I am going to ask people who voted for these to volunteer in some instances. So obviously, when you talk about your value prop, it really comes down to what problem are you solving. If you really think about it, there is no business around that isn't solving a problem. Customers don't part with their money easily. If you don't solve a problem for them, you're not really going to get far. Now, the thing is, problem is a word that obviously can be defined in many different ways. So if I'm, MGM Studios and my business is making movies, am I really solving a problem? Well, no, but, people get bored. That could be a problem. A movie is a nice way to combat that, right? So think in terms of that kind of orientation. And then to take it one step further, we think about pain. So that problem that they're feeling, or that problem that they're experiencing, how does that translate into their state of mind, their state of being, their worldview? So if my problem is I need entertainment because otherwise I'll get bored, well, what is the pain? I mean, boredom is brutal. Boredom is something that we associate with a lot of negativity. But there are so many other examples. So if we're in healthcare, well, this is an easy one because you couldn't come up with a more literal definition of customer pain than a surgical procedure or a medical device or a pharmaceutical product or however you're looking at the healthcare category. So think about what is their pain and what is the medicine that you are offering. This is an orientation that we always want to be in, right? Because you want to be that superhero that can swoop in and represent a better way. And I'll even go one further. I'll even divide medicine into two ideas. Are you a vitamin or are you a painkiller? Do they want your product to avoid or to avoid something in the future? Some pain in the future? Or are they trying to alleviate some pain from their past and present, right? And vitamin and painkiller are maybe, not necessarily thought of as direct polar opposites, but in reality, you might be both, but you're probably going to steer towards one or the other. From there, then the question becomes, well, why you, right? Because the odds are there are others out there that know about this pain, have identified a problem similar to the one you've defined, and probably have a solution. It might be a little bit like yours, and it might be very different from yours to your trained eye, but to your customer, are they going to be able to differentiate your solution from their solution? So knowing why you is really critical, and so that means, well, how do you do it differently? Right? Why you? Because you're obviously bringing a different approach. You're bringing different sensibilities from your experience, from your vision for how this problem gets solved. And in the process, you might also be identifying why the other competitor's approach maybe doesn't work. Maybe it doesn't work as well. Maybe it's not as future-proofed as yours. And that's where you start to really dig in. Quantifying your impact is really where that's sort of like the icing on the cake, because as soon as you can take words that are meaningful about the problem you're solving, the pain you're alleviating, if you can quantify it by saying either the pain is felt in this magnitude, right? 100 million Americans cannot get adequate health care. That's one way to do it. But also you can quantify your impact by saying, we've changed the game for 20 million Americans who previously couldn't get health care, and we've shown them the light, right? So wherever we can, the metrics are incredibly valuable. And that can be done commercially, but that can also be quantified in terms of your social impact. And so this is something that I always talk about, right? Because sometimes you go out in the world and you find people that say, what does it mean to be mission driven, right? Everybody could just take some time and articulate their mission, vision, and values. But if we're in business to sell widgets, well, that's not really saving the world. So how do we draw a line between these? Well, commercially, the impact would be, customer acquisition, revenue growth, profitability, renewal rate, and all of that good stuff. If you're looking for investors, you're trying to keep the lights on, these are super important for that and many other reasons. But your social impact is something that I sense, resonates strongly with this group, which is also communicating a whole other story, which is, why do we do this? Not just to make money and line our pockets, but to also make a mark, leave a legacy, right? Do something meaningful. And all of these principles apply just as much to those. So I like the example of Duolingo for a value proposition. The brands that I chose for these, I'm just assuming are somewhat universally known. So if anybody's not tried Duolingo and experienced what it's like to learn a language on Duolingo compared to, say, sitting in a 10th grade Spanish class, let me know and I'll break it down a little bit. But it's gamified, it's fun, it's bite-size, and there is nothing about it that is daunting. A lot of language learners are easily daunted and scared away by the differences with their native language and the grammar and everything about it, right? But what they do is they make language learning accessible, fun, and effective. And gamification is one of the mechanisms by which they do it. Now, look at these taglines they use. Learn a language for free, forever. Beautifully simple. The world's best way to learn a language, right? I mean, that's marketing communications. That's not quite the value proposition. But I'll show you like a format that can get you closer to achieving something similar, right? And you follow 5 steps. So the things you absolutely want to nail in your value proposition are who, what, how, the alternative, and the differentiation. That really just covers a lot of the points that I just made. So I like to think of it like a Mad Libs, right? So if you ever played Mad Libs when you were a kid, picture the story with a bunch of gaps in it. And it's, a noun goes here and a verb there and an adjective there. But you're blind to that. What you do is you fill out the noun, verb, adjective, etc. on the page ahead of time. And then you plug in those words, and it's delightfully nonsensical, and it's fun for the whole family. So you can see how the who, what, how, alternative, and differentiation actually end up in a very pithy statement, which is your value proposition. So now I'm going to call on somebody who voted for articulating your value proposition, and we're going to ask you to try this out. Any volunteers? Yes,
I can go.
please.
So just fit that, right? We help people achieve housing by, that would be a step, providing an online platform. Unlike Zillow, allow them to navigate the entire journey. I don't know if that was too verbose.
No, not too verbose. So the last piece, differentiation, was navigate the entire journey. Okay. So if we were to pick these apart, so we help people achieve housing by providing an online platform. Unlike Zillow, we help them navigate the entire journey, right? So then we can look at these one by one and say, are we making as refined a statement as possible? So we help people. Addressable market, 8 billion people on the planet. Can you narrow down from there?
Yeah, it's basically it's a platform for affordable housing. So it's in terms of population, 7 million.
7 million, or 11 million, well, it depends, 11 million.
So actually it's 7 million units, but the number of people seeking those 7 million is an unknown. It's a very large number in the US.
Those 7 million units are defined by some geographic area, or?
They're defined as income restricted units. They're
Okay,
No, but there's 11 million people that income.
beautiful. Rent-burdened people. See,
Yes.
now we go from 8 billion to,
It's probably more than 11 million, but right now that's the number we have.
okay. So rent-burdened is a lot more precise of a language, right? And that helps us understand. I mean, even if you're not in the business, we can all speculate a little bit what rent burden looks like. it's not just housing, but it's affordable housing, right? So now we've added a nice modifier to that. We help rent-burdened people achieve affordable housing by providing an online platform. Now, it's an online platform. You talk about how it's not like Zillow, and you talk about the ways that it's different from Zillow, but is there more you can say about the platform?
Yeah. So this is the struggle. This is why I chose this particular.
No, but people
Help me out.
search based on so there's a common application, and so basically they're searching based on what they are eligible for, looking at affordable being paying £30.
Oh, okay.
They're 30% of their income in rent, right?
Yep.
So they're searching based on what they can afford, or what, it depends. If it's capital A, it's what they can afford. If it's what they're eligible for, if it's lowercase a.
Got it. So what you're providing is an online platform of basically curated properties that fit with their financial parameters,
Yeah.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
30% being a benchmark for you're not going to be spending more than 30% of your income on this housing.
Yes.
Okay. And then, unlike Zillow, I think Zillow is self-evident. We all know what Zillow does. You're differentiated from Zillow because you're helping them navigate the whole journey. So if I was meeting you for the first time and hearing about your business for the first time, what stages of the journey are you facilitating that Zillow is not?
So the application.
Okay.
So unlike most property management sites where you apply separately to every property, we created a common app. So they create their profile, and that's what's used for the application because we capture everything about the household. We also allow them to upload documents, and then we compare the documents with the self-reported profile data to make sure that they get a score on confidence. So when the property managers see a high confidence level, they know that they're working with valid leads as opposed to people that have misrepresented themselves.
Got it. Okay.
And so a lot of things that currently are done in the back end, we're moving them to the front. So it shortens the approval cycle significantly.
And is the approval the finish line in this process?
Once they are approved to be a tenant, that there's stuff that happens after that also that
Sure.
we capture, which is every year they have to be recertified. And they submit the same paperwork over and over again. But because we store everything online, we just ask them to keep updating their profile.
Got it. Okay. So, in a couple minutes, I think what we've settled on here is, and what's the name of your business?
Access.
Access. Great name. Access helps rent-burdened people achieve affordable housing by providing, what did we say, an end-to-end platform, an online platform that, unlike Zillow, provides value from application to approval to recertification.
Correct.
So that's a short elevator ride,
That is
right?
We change achieve, or I'm wondering what
Yeah.
people think about
Achieve home ownership.
well, not necessarily.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
So, because I don't know, maybe achieve,
Achieve sounds good to me.
get housed. I mean, I guess I'm just thinking like of some.
I see what you mean. Semantically, achieve might not be as flexible a word as, you know,
Big word.
we help rent-burdened people find a home, right? So yeah, absolutely. We can color outside the lines there. But I think that, you know, once you've been through this exercise, and hopefully each of you are sort of thinking about it for your own business, and it starts to click into place, then you can say, all right, all I got to do is memorize these two sentences, and now I've got, you know, a 15-second elevator pitch that I can use for anybody. And so this process is totally scalable. Any of you can use it. I urge you to try it out. And we're going to move on to the next one, which is Oh, I wanted to also just close the loop by pointing out how Duolingo did it. We help language learners achieve their desired level of fluency by gamifying the learning process. Unlike textbooks and tutors, their primary competition, what we're doing is we're making lessons bite-sized and convenient. I would also add fun. So now that you've gone through the hard work of doing it for yourself, you can see how good it sounds when it's a business that you know and love, right? Good. So let's keep on moving. Generating demand and awareness. I think it's easy to picture what it looks like. The hard part is, how do you do this without spending all your capital and not wasting it all? Anyone that comes from the marketing world knows that there's an adage that marketers always use, which is, I know that half the money I'm spending on marketing is wasted, but I will never know which half it is. And that has changed a little bit as digital marketing has taken over a bigger and bigger share of wallet, and there's more data to sort of validate your investments. But in principle, it's still true. So when we think about demand and awareness, just a couple of themes to keep in mind. First of all, always be thinking about inbound versus outbound. Sometimes we call it push versus pull. So what is coming to us that we want to capture and convert versus where do we want to go out and push our way in front of the audience? And you really can't succeed without doing a little bit of both and doing it well. So whether that's content, partnerships, paid media, whatever it might be, it's going to vary, and I'm going to show a table later which will help to clarify that. PR and thought leadership, I think, for this group is very germane because it really is more on the side of owned and earned media, i.e. the media you don't have to write a check for, or at least not traditionally speaking. And it comes from having a mission and a really inspiring vision, getting up on stage and transferring that emotion and that drive to your audience. And when you do that well, people can't resist you. That's thought leadership, right? Which is a split hair away from good PR. Also think about growth loops versus funnels. So we all know what the funnel looks like, and there's one fatal flaw with the marketing funnel, right? So opportunities come in through the top, and they become fewer and fewer as they get qualified, but enough come out the bottom that you have a business. The problem with the funnel is, well, what happens when it's in the bottom, right? If you were pouring from one container into a smaller container using a funnel, okay, now it's there, now what, right? The loop is a way to think about it differently. And the key there is customer success, right? So once you've done all the work to get them into the funnel and groom them, and some people will fall off the wagon, so to speak, but some stay with you and they become your customers. Does it end there? It does not. It does not end there, because your customers can be the connective tissue to go right back up to the top of the funnel. They're the ones who, first of all, if you renew them, you're never going to have to pay to acquire them again, and that's a lot cheaper, right? Second, more importantly, your best customers can be amazing referral sources, either through a testimonial, through showing up on stage at a conference together and conveying authority onto you. So keep that in mind, that the funnel is great until it limits our vision for how to create a virtuous cycle. So another example here that I like is Lego. We all know what Lego is as the core product. Lego in the last decade or so has done some amazing things with its brand, because as toy brands have become commoditized, what they did was they hitched their wagon to other brands that are meaningful to their audience. And that's really through these collaborations in the pop culture space. So a little anecdote, my son went through a torrid love affair with Batman at one point in his childhood. He's only 10, he's still a kid. But a few years ago, he got really into Batman. He only got into Batman because we went to see the Lego Batman movie. And the Lego Batman movie is really funny, and it's really well done. And you look at it and you think, man, this is like two titans, these two franchises, Lego and Batman, coming together. God, they did something amazing. And so the other thing that Lego's done that's brilliant is they've nurtured demand across generations. So I, as his father, took him to that movie, and I started thinking about the Legos that I used to play with when I was a kid. And they only came in like 6 different colors, and now they're in every possible shade of every color, right? And there was no Batman. There was nothing like that, right? But it took the nostalgia from that and connected it to my kids' world, which is a very different one than the one I grew up in. And so I think, what they've effectively done, what Lego has done, is earned media through these relationships. And that's a good concept going into this next slide. So starting with owned media, I'm going to pick on someone else, but I'm just going to quickly go through this. Owned media is everything you have that's close at hand. You got your website, you got your socials, you have your voice. Your voice is part of your owned media. It's cheap, costs next to nothing, right? You have full control over it. You don't have to, run it by anyone. There are some obvious benefits. There are some limitations. So before we get into the other forms of media, can I get a volunteer who voted for generating awareness and demand? Because we're going to talk a little bit about some of the media channels that you're considering for your business.
Sure.
Yes.
So we are now shifting. We used to kind of target K-12. Now we're shifting to consumer, and we're building an application aimed at 4 to 8-year-olds. And obviously, the parents are the ones who will be downloading this and paying for it.
Let's just, that's good background on the business.
Mm-hmm.
How do you promote this?
Yeah, we have a couple of ideas. So one is partnerships. So we have a few partners that already are on board. One is an educational technology marketplace. The challenge there is that they're also new, like kind of the same time as us, so it's a little unproven. But that's a revenue share kind of thing where they offer curated selection of educational technology tools to parents online. That's really the most concrete one. We have like 2 other partnerships, but the actual nature of the way that we would leverage those is still unclear. There's one is Sesame, where we actually have an agreement with them, but the one I don't want to take too much time with this, but it's an R&D agreement, and we have like a commercialization letter of intent with them that's under legal review, but it's a very high level of pay. It's like we want to work together to commercialize this, but what that looks like is the level. More concretely, like looking ahead, we're looking at partnerships with, for example, kids. So TrueMe, Gab, potentially being part of that ecosystem, and/or like pre-installs on those devices. And then the other one is kid safe streaming services like Doodle TV, PBS Kids, Sensible, looking at possible. One of the ways in which that could be a partnership is actually our technology could be with those streaming services, so you could actually turn on ThinkHuman TV within the apps potentially. That's one way to do it. The other one is just a revenue share as well. And then I guess most obviously there's the digital advertising through like Meta, Instagram, seeing kind of like what that looks like with some optimization, and seeing that we were getting like $3 cost per lead of people giving us their email before the product exists, kind of like conceptual advertising and saying, hey, would you want this? And like sign up to find out more, like when it comes out or whatnot. So we got a sense of approximately how much that is costing. So.
Okay. So this product that's targeting 4 to 8-year-olds, what's it called?
That specific app is ThinkHuman Junior.
ThinkHuman Junior. Okay. So owned media would be, right, the sort of blocking and tackling where you say, hey, we are ThinkHuman TV. We are about to launch ThinkHuman Junior. It speaks to a subset of our broader audience. We got to tell the world, right? Which means it's going to have a web page. It's going to be something that we post about on wherever you choose, whatever handles you're already sort of operating, like Instagram, TikTok, wherever it may be, YouTube. and you control all of that content, and the really the only obvious cost to that is the human capital of somebody, you or someone on your team, actually making the content, managing it, etc. The earned media is a little more interesting, right? So you get into a scenario where you're talking about, first you talked about a software partnership with these ed tech vendors, right? And so a lot of partnerships get announced. The simplest way to look at that is a press release. Okay, now we've announced it to the world that we're doing something new and different. We've launched a product, we've tied up with this other company. They've got a whole other brand name. Maybe they're better known than you. That attracts attention to you. Not only that, but their distribution network that they're now bringing you to effectively is a form of earned media, because those are doors that you're not opening on your own, in theory, right? I like that you're also looking at hardware partnerships, because that just allows you to widen the pie. It creates more playing field, more runway, and in many cases it's a numbers game, right? So how many swings can we get at the plate? Because we have to take a swing if we're going to hit a single or a double or a home run, right? And so you can see some of the examples here, right? Customer testimonials. Now that you're tied up with one of those software companies, in theory, right, you have access to their customers and can now wow them, and you have a quicker path to getting that validation externally for you. But their whole marketing engine kind of becomes something that you've now licensed. It's like you're renting a car from their fleet almost, right? And then we talked about paid media. That was the last one you mentioned, where you did this diagnostic and you effectively were selling a future state of a product. And so, you know, this is last for a reason, because it's really, it's harder to get it right. And it's more important to nail down all of the underlying data and the principles, and testing and iterating becomes so critical, because if you're not careful, your budget can fly away, right? So did you mention you were testing on Meta? You did Meta ads? So Meta is basically the most robust performance marketing platform, because why? Because their social graph can really narrow down. It's not just parents of 4 to 8-year-olds, that's a start. You might have some geographic territories that you're looking at, but you know, you might also be thinking that it's parents who have a certain, you know, tech savviness, right? And so you might start thinking about parents that work in certain industries. They might even work for certain employers. It might be parents that they themselves are technophiles, and they read, you know, they follow pages on Meta's platforms like TechCrunch or like, you know, Engadget or Gizmodo, right? And so, but that comes at a cost. And differently, you know, Google search ads would work a little bit differently. That's intent-based, right? And so there's a whole cottage industry of providers out there that can, you know, say, hey, we're here, you're a partner to demystify this for you. They're also not cheap. That's why this is in the third column, because generally speaking, for businesses like yours, I would say max out your owned media, earn as much as you can in, you know, to get into the spotlight. Do it through partnerships, do it through scratching and clawing, you know, contributed content. Approach publishers and say, hey, I will ghostwrite you an article. And they'll say, fine, you can do it, just don't be overly promotional, we'll let you do it. So it's like kind of like sweat equity, right? Then, and only then, you start looking at paid media, because you've generated some data in the owned and earned channels that can help you maybe differentiate. This message doesn't work. This message, you know, all about the innovativeness of our product, not going to work with that audience. But the value messaging is going to work, where we can say, hey, we do this cheaper, right? That's an example. So that brings us to our third. We're gonna cap it at 3. Converting leads into customers. So who's going to be my third and final volunteer? Who voted for converting leads into customers? I know at least 5 of you are having this problem. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a little bit more about our company. It's a freelance platform for certified community health workers to pick up jobs with Medicaid. So essentially helping, you know, underrepresented communities navigate. So some of our leads right now, we're getting a lot from, you know, advisors, just previous network, and just outbound. The problem is the sales cycle in healthcare takes pretty long for the most part. So we're having that problem where we know there's interest, we found the pain point, kind of to your point, whether it's that vitamin or the painkiller, we're offering that to them and they want to move forward. It just takes a while to actually get to the point where the MOU or like the agreement is signed.
Absolutely. And it's not getting better. Most industries, sales cycles are getting longer and longer. Part of that is a byproduct of how more buyers have more information at their fingertips, right? It used to be you go to the car dealer, they've got all the brochures with all of the information about the makes and models, and that's the only place you can get it. And now everything's changed because the internet has put all of that stuff online, and all of a sudden that customer that walked in totally clueless now walks in frequently. If any of you have bought a car recently, I would wager you probably knew more than that salesperson. That's just a wild guess of mine. So that's an analogy for almost anything, right? They know so much. But there are other reasons why. Sometimes the urgency's not there, right? Sometimes the messaging, your messaging, doesn't quite land with them, and that goes back to the value prop and some other things. Sometimes it's the wrong fit, it's the right fit at the wrong time. And then, of course, there's pricing. So, this one's a common one, right? People are just going to say, oh, that's not in the budget right now. Rarely does that mean no. That just means you got to probe more for questions. So there are some sales process basics that I think are worth being mindful of here. Discovery is one that I think is often overlooked. Think of it this way. When you're face-to-face with a prospect, your job basically is to ask them questions until you're blue in the face. Any question that you can ask which can illuminate something in the process that can make you more intelligent about how to solve their problem, how to be that vitamin or a painkiller, is a question that is worth asking. And it means if your airtime with that customer is precious, you might weigh which questions to ask, but you should always be asking. You only tell once they ask, right? Nurturing those leads, right? When they say, hey, I'm not ready, it's staying with them. It's continuing to probe. And then the closing techniques, I wish I could just cover this in 15 seconds. It's an art form. People make a career out of learning how to close business. But there are some tried and true methods. Be in the mindset of frictionless selling, because if your product, you're in an early stage where you can experiment. So you don't have to, check with corporate whether this promotion or this discount or this pricing model would work. Just do it. Experiment, right? A/B test your way to whatever your customer is going to want. And you see some examples of how to remove that friction. So Amazon's a great example here. Now, I'm not pretending like Amazon is similar to any of your businesses, but they can be a source of inspiration because what do they do, right? We all have experienced the convenience of buying on Amazon. I will assume. Why is it so convenient? Because they have so much data that they anticipate your needs, right? They are able to deliver options and formats that are meaningful to you, sometimes even better than you would have known yourself. They personalize everything that they're giving you, from the product placement to the messaging to the offers and promotions, etc. The checkout is as good as it comes, right? And we all know what a bad checkout process looks like. And then, of course, on volume, if you're a Prime member, you just realize, okay, well, the more I do this, the more I'm going to get back. And that's how you end up in this virtuous or vicious cycle, however you choose to look at it. But what are they doing? They're basically taking window shoppers and turning them into customers. So with that in mind, there's a framework that I want everyone here to think about, and it's BANT, B-A-N-T. And there are 4 categories of questions that you always want to be thinking of. Now, you're never going to be able to ask every single question that you want, but you want to make sure that you understand, first of all, you've asked the important questions about budget. Is the budget already allocated? Right? Because if you have a gig platform for freelance workers in the healthcare space and their money for this is all used up till next year, well, it's not the right time for that conversation. But in the process, you can say, well, how much have you spent on something like this in the past? How would you know if that investment is worth the cost, right? So what are some other budget questions that you might ask?
Yeah, so usually I ask because generally community health workers have full-time on staff. They have a budget cuts with CMS and just regulation now. I just asked them like how much you guys spending on salary plus like benefits.
Yep.
What's the reach of it? And yeah, I asked them like their conversion rates after, right? So like their ROI that they bring in. Those are like the major ones I asked. I present our data points, right?
Yep.
If you go farther, you know, this is how much you would save. This is how much you would be able to scale your efforts as well while saving money. But yeah, those are generally the questions I ask.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So from there, then you start thinking about authority. So, all right, there's some money here, and we think we can access it, and we know who controls it. But this person that I'm talking to, are they the one that's going to get me there? Right? The economic buyer, the person who signs that contract and signs that check, oftentimes they're going to be too busy to talk to you. But there's somebody maybe a little bit lower down the ladder that is your champion. The champion, there's a lot of ways to define it, but I want you to think about champion as they are the person that's selling when you're not in the room, right? And so that means they need to be educated, they need to have some influence, they need to be able to articulate everything we've talked about, the value prop, the benefit, and all that. And also, importantly, they need to like you. Because if they don't like you, they're not going to stick their neck out for you. So don't forget that, because you basically can't sell if you're not liked. Maybe it's obvious, but actually you'd be amazed how many people forget that. So who needs to sign off on this? Who else is going to influence this decision, right? Are there going to be people coming in from procurement and legal and finance that could derail this? Because every one of those is a risk factor. But every one of those could be turned into an ally if you play it right. And so asking questions about authority, I think, is really important. Questions about need. So is it really something you need, right? Do you need this platform? Well, there must be an underlying problem you're looking to solve, and you took the meeting, so you must have been willing to at least mortgage 30 minutes. There's some need, but can you articulate your need better for me, right? So that I can better understand how to position my solution. What have you done to date, right? What are the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves? Because they may have a long laundry list of things that they want, and for their budget, they might only be able to afford 2 of them. And then, you know, this last one I think is a powerful one. Who else is impacted by this problem? It's a good question to ask, because if nothing else, if this person starts to ghost you, now you at least have names of other people you can go after, right? The last one here is timeline. And timeline is, you know, I mean, there are a lot of ways to look at this, because sometimes they'll say, well, we need it right away. And then sometimes the action doesn't line up with the words, and they're not moving fast. And so that's when you start to probe with questions about why. Well, why right away? And how do you define right away? Do you need it done by the next budget cycle, or do you need it done by Monday? Because those are very different. And competing priorities, right, would be a good question to ask as well. Just to understand, like, if you say this is important, is it the second or third most important thing, or is it the 11th most important thing? And if your boss's boss was in the room, would they agree? Because they tend to have a little more of that influence, right? So I'm going to keep moving just because I want to get us out of here on time. I talked about critical intelligence. So everything about the go-to-market planning process, it's really, a lot of this is artistry, right? A lot of this is finding the right question, finding the right language, and it's really just kind of like reading the signals and knowing how to respond. But we all know that there's a world of data out there which can de-risk a lot of these decisions, and it's in tandem that they're incredibly powerful. So how do you turn these blind spots, which everybody has, into floodlights? I'm going to skip this one just for time, but basically when you think about running a business in this environment with so many headwinds, right? Imagine you leave your port with precious cargo and you're looking to get to another port halfway around the world. If you don't have your GPS or your instruments to navigate, what could happen? You could end up, with nothing but seagulls and choppy waves, and that's not a good place for anybody. So the difference would be, what's the data and intelligence that you can invest in to actually navigate safely and get that cargo offloaded and get on with life? So everybody's got those blind spots. Everybody in all walks of life, every industry, every company. The important thing that I want to make very clear in this discussion is that in this day and age, The ability to go out and source intelligence has never been cheaper, faster, and more effective. My first job out of college, I worked for a research company, and what we used to do was we would pay people to fill out these diaries about how they ate. And if they ate Ritz crackers at 3 p.m., they would say it. And if they put cream cheese on top of those crackers, they had to tell us. And if they had 6 of them, they would have to tell us. And if they ate 6 more an hour later, they had to tell us. Imagine, right? Nowadays, the way the information age has changed the data collection process as well as our ways of processing and digesting that data, it's completely turned on its head. So the research company that I worked for might have charged you 50 grand and said, hey, we'll get back to you in 8 weeks with a survey of 1,000 respondents that is going to help you plan your go-to-market strategy. And nowadays you're looking at like 72 hours and $1,000, and that's how the game has changed. So my well-kept, not so well-kept secret is I love to use Pollfish for this. If you have an appetite to play around with survey data, I highly recommend it. And so I'm not pitching Pollfish, I'm just saying that this is how I use Pollfish. They offer tremendous reach. What they do is through a network of partner apps, over 100,000 of them, they have non-monetary incentives to answer surveys. So, hey, you're playing Subway Surfer, and here's a cool avatar. If you're a Philly Eagles fan, you can wear a Philly Eagles helmet while you play the game. Awesome. You want to pay $1 for it? No? How about you answer the survey? We'll give it to you for free. That's how it happens, right? And they have, you see the reach. Those 250 million people, by the way, are mostly in the U.S. It is 160 countries, but they're mostly in the U.S. And so that's how you can run these surveys, incredibly robust, incredibly fast. You can also do qualitative research, so you can start to basically interview people without having to fly to some location to meet them, right? You can quickly create and deploy the surveys using AI. You can reach precise audience targets using your filtering, and then through your questionnaire, you can further weed out the ones you don't want. You can do all the A/B testing and all of that. And if you're concerned about data quality, I've run a number of these, and I've been pretty satisfied with the bot detection and the fraud detection and all of their mechanisms. And so, fear not, this is not a bunch of hucksters out here. This is like a legit research company. But I've turned this into a managed service because a lot of times the hardest part is really how do you scope the survey and turn it into something that is actionable, right? And there's a lot of research principles that go into that. So I'll just quickly cover the process that I've followed, which is basically discovery interviews, defining that audience, executing the survey, and making sure that we're hitting certain benchmarks. I'm running one right now where they said we've got to have the Seattle and San Francisco markets represented. And so sort of working with those target criteria, make sure that we hit those numbers en route to getting real market intelligence. All of that it's easily done on the platform. It takes a little bit of experience, but it's actually kind of fun when you get into it. And what I've often done is delivered not only the survey data, but then also some third-party research. So one of my clients wanted to expand into the US, and he said, we're targeting Series A and B fintechs. And so augmenting survey data with data from PitchBook and from Crunchbase about funding trends, that sort of thing helps to create a more sort of detailed picture. And really what it comes down to is you're making better decisions, you're doing it faster, you're mitigating risk, because if you're making assumptions, that's not a good place to be, right? Effectively, you turn around to investors and say, hey, we ran this survey with a reputable research company. We got 1,000 people to answer these questions, and that's what we learned. That is what's powering our go-to-market plans. That looks very different, looks and sounds very different to somebody who's going to write you a check. Some visuals of what it looks like. So picture, you're responding to a survey on an app. By the way, it's real cheap. It starts at 95 cents a response. And then you can start to break down cohorts. So that client that has people in San Francisco and Seattle, well, the audience says one thing, but in San Francisco, they value something like that, right? And in Seattle, maybe they're a little more value conscious. And these different features of the product indexed high or low across these audiences. So you start to slice and dice the population and get more intelligent insights. And then finally, you can turn it into any kind of intelligence, to really kind of align to the objectives. In this example, it was, a web development firm, the one I mentioned that's serving fintechs, going out and just trying to be confident about market expansion. So I went through that part quick, but I wanted to arm you with some tools because honestly, I think if this had existed 10 years ago, it would have been a game changer. I still think it's a game changer. But I think that these tools are super cool. So that brings us full circle. I don't know if we have a little time for questions. I see it's already past 3:30, but hopefully you've learned something useful today. And
We do. Thank you very much.
my pleasure.
Two things. Yes, we do have time for questions too. Would we be able to share this deck with?
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
And I'll turn to questions.
Yes.
I have two questions.
Sure.
As an early stage startup company competing against the larger, more venture-backed companies, that's one of the questions that I have. The second one is with all the AI coming to play, it messed up with the whole sales cycle. So I wanted to ask about those two questions, like how we navigate and deal with those sales cycle with AI situations.
How has AI messed up your sales cycle? Take us through the gory details.
I mean, like AI, SDR agents, we put out the lead and doesn't, convert into the sales opportunity, things like that, or using with the AI into the marketing content, those also think, because we're in impact focused companies, right? So I don't wanna have a content that is just too genetic, too AI-ish, too,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So.
I think what you're saying should be what everybody follows. A lot of people cut corners. There's a lot of people that are trying to be the first, solo run unicorn, and everyone's looking for shortcuts. AI is giving them shortcuts where they previously didn't exist. Are those shortcuts thoughtful, and are they going to set you up to win? Probably a small minority of them will, but I myself am not a fan of AI-generated emails, that sort of thing. I do a lot of email sequences. I do my own SDR work. Never, ever do I never write an AI-generated sequence. Now, what I will do is draft an outline and then, take the red pen to it. And so I think what it comes to, it's a very robust question you're asking, right? How do you, basically you're saying, how do you make AI work for you, not against you? And I think it comes down to number one, experiment with the tools all you can. This technology is changing faster than anybody can make sense of it. And so if you have the luxury of, even an hour a week, hey, I'm just gonna keep a list of tools, I'm gonna play around with them. Perfect example, Perplexity just launched a deep research tool competing with the $200 a month version of ChatGPT. They say it's as good. Now that's a game changer if they're able to do that, right? That was like 2 weeks ago, no one even knew what deep research was, right? And so just having a little bit of time to experiment with it and make it work for you. The other thing is measure, right? So if you're running a bunch of sequences, A/B test it, and the open rates and the reply rates and the spam rates won't lie, and that'll give you some objectivity. That not only gets you to your goal faster, it also reduces the cognitive load, right? Because if you're sitting there looking at this data, scratching your head, saying oh my God, what do I do? Do I do A or B? Well, if you outsource it to the data, now you can turn your precious energy to other things. You also asked a question about how do you compete with the bigger funded companies. I think what's nice about being in the impact space, you all have amazing stories to tell. The bigger funded companies, in my experience, their stories might be as good, they might be, but they don't invest as much in getting to the heart of like what they're doing, because they're too busy just counting their cash, or they're too busy getting out in front of their big investment plans now that they got that seed round, that Series A, whatever it is. And you have the ability to win in the hearts and minds of your audience, right? Win with the thoughtful people, because those are going to be your customers anyway, right? I mean, just based on some of the synopses I've seen of the businesses you're all running, you're not going to be selling to people who are just kind of whimsically like throwing money at problems. Your customers are going to be the ones who take the time to really think about, what is this company offering me? Do they understand my challenges? And is there something in that company and in that founder that I believe in? So be authentic, invest in it, rehearse your pitches, record your pitches, listen to them, iron out the wrinkles, and go back and do it as many times as you can, right? Those are some ideas, but it's also a journey, right? So find your trusted advisors, your coaches, people that know your business, that you can ask at any time, like, hey, what do I do about this?
So more work to us.
That's why you signed up for this, right?
I want to work 9 to 5.
Yeah, more like 5 to 9, right?
I guess what AI is, AI try to like cut your time, save your time, where you have to put more energy and time to build up more authentic storytellings about how.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also think, there's 1,000,001 ways that AI can make a meaningful difference for your business. They don't all have to be externally facing, right? I use AI incessantly throughout my day, but my clients would never know the difference, because I'm doing it for planning, and I'm doing it to organize myself, and I'm so like operationally it's more than a tool. It's really strategic, right? And so those are also low risk environments, versus if I gave a client a deliverable and I got called out for it being AI generated, that would be the ultimate embarrassment, personally.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
95 cents, was that per question or per response from the user?
Good question. Per response. So 95's on Pollfish, the way it works is a questionnaire up to 5 questions with no audience targeting. So general population, it's 95 cents per response. And then for longer surveys, or if you layer on this geography and this household income and this industry, it starts to go up. Most of the ones that I've run end up $1.50, $2 at most. Just still unbelievably cheap.
It is.
Yeah.
And the second question is, this is just some real life experience that we're trying to improve upon. So we're in the affordable housing space, right? And the way we pitch to the company so far is, how long does it take you to rent out a income restricted unit, because it's regulated and whatnot. So average is 6 months to 12 months. So they're losing that much rent, and we can automate it so it's, you can shrink the cycle down to a month, if that. It gets a lot of property managers excited, and they want to have a second conversation, but we struggle with the compliance officers, because there's always some thing about how do you do this or that, and we can do research, but there's always, at least we've had two such customers.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, how do you deal with those situations?
I think part of that, to top on what he's saying, is that I think there's some fear around how is this product going to take over what I've been working so hard my whole life
Right.
doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So compliance people, that's their job, to make sure that all these applications meet the compliance. If that means taking 12 months to lease a unit, that's not, the bottom line doesn't necessarily matter to them, right? What matters to them is that they have a job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think part of what we've been trying to say is like, we're gonna free up people that do compliance to do the science, not thinking about monotony. But there is a lot of fear, I think, when you're
Yep.
talking about technology and change management piece, that I think is really, especially with like a SaaS product, can get,
Yeah.
it can get really tricky, so.
let's think of it in terms of personas, right? This compliance manager, are they the initial point of contact? Are they? No. And are they the signature on the dotted line?
No, but they vet it, like, so what happens is
Right.
we'll have, like, the CEO will be in touch, they love the idea, awesome. Let me get my compliance team on the
Yep.
call, because they're the ones on the front lines. I want them to tell us, is this a product they'll use?
Yep.
They're thinking, oh, one more thing I have to learn how to use. I already have my system, I like how I do it. This is like the 12th pitch I've had this week on a different product. I mean, people, they've said, like, there's like a product that will shine people's shoes that they get pitched to, you know, like
Yep.
every day. So then they go back to the CEO and say, ugh, this is too much. I don't want to. We've got our system. And
Yeah.
then the CEO is like, oh, I thought my compliance team isn't going to use it.
And the CEO is probably weighing that and saying, well, it would be cool, but I don't want the headache of that compliance person, and it's one more drag on the process.
Yeah.
So, and the property manager would be like the day-to-day contact. So you start with the property manager, you're hoping to get to the CEO, and everything's going great, and then the compliance manager comes in and derails the whole thing.
Or we're with the CEO.
Or
We
you're
have
s-
the CEO,
yeah.
right? And like,
Yeah.
we're taking up people's time, but like.
No, but these are
it's-
common scenarios. I mean, in enterprise selling, what you just described could happen in any industry, B2B, B2C, B2G. Like, it happens all the time. Because
Yeah.
why? Because corporations are not made of, 50,000 foot soldiers, clones of each other, right? They have different functions and agendas. And that compliance manager, so the extreme version would be this person sees us as a threat. They're going to submarine all of our efforts, and like, we don't know how to get around them. Or the other way to look at it is, well, you're a compliance manager. How much do you enjoy pushing paper all day, every day for the rest of your life? Or would you rather do more strategic things? Would you rather help raise the bar for what the company can achieve from your position in a regulatory affairs type of a context? Because what we're doing is we are basically taking away grunt work, and you will be better off. So the pitch to them is very different from the we help rent burdened people, right?
Right.
It's a different value prop.
Very different pitches.
It's a different value
Yeah,
prop.
yeah.
And so I could go on about this, but the persona-based marketing is incredibly powerful, because what you find is, it'll go back to that funnel, right? As you get closer and closer to that signature, different people, different faces in the crowd come in, out of the woodwork, and God, how many times have I seen this, and probably a lot of you have seen this too, like, things were going great, what the hell happened? This just got sidelined at the 11th hour. And it just goes to show that you look at every individual relationship within that enterprise relationship as a reset. And that means a new first impression, a different value proposition. And the value proposition to that compliance manager might have nothing to do with rent burdened people. It might have everything to do with, you're going to get promoted when they see that you're so smart and you're writing amazing strategic plans for the future of the company.
I have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
We talk about the enterprise side of the sales, and I'm in the SMB market. It's stressful.
Sure. Different
So-
stress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, can you share a little bit more of like strategies and tactics of how to work with SMB market?
Yes. I'll distill this as much as I can. The main difference in my mind is not the headcount or the annual revenues of the company. Actually, in my mind, the main difference between the SMB sale and the enterprise sale is the emotional connection to the money that they're investing. Because in a corporate environment, if I'm a budget holder and I'm going to sign off on it, what am I sticking my neck out over? It could be embarrassing. I might have egg on my face if something blows up. But if I've got a good reputation and I do a lot of other good work, I'll be fine. If I'm the CEO of a 5-person company, that check that I just wrote you might be the money that I instead would use to send my kid to summer camp, and it becomes a lot more emotional, right? And so you need to mirror that emotion and basically make them the offer they can't refuse, which is like, hey, your kid's great and all, your kid still gets to go to summer camp, but what you're doing here has an emotional appeal of equal value. So, you know, are we like, and that's where, again, it comes back to doubling down on your story and sort of tugging on the heartstrings. People think that data is the way that we sell in this environment where we're so surrounded by data. It has never been less true than now. People buy for emotional reasons. They qualify for rational reasons. But when they finally make that decision, they say, how did I feel in this dialogue? Do I like you? Am I going to groan every time I have to meet with you because, you know, I'm just like, this is like not something that I want, right? Like these are the things, and it largely is emotional and very irrational.